Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for coming here. The Halifax Fire Department this afternoon will be giving an update on the tragic fire which happened in Halifax in the community of Spryfield on February 19th. To open, I'd like to first acknowledge and pass on our continuing and sincere condolences to the Barho family as a result of this tragedy, and to the entire community who have been so affected. Here today we have our Fire Chief Ken Stuebing, our Deputy Chief of Operations Peter Andrews, and we also have our Division Chief of Fire Prevention Matt Covey. What we will do this afternoon, first of all, Fire Chief Stuebing will give a statement, and then Chief Stuebing and his senior management team, including myself, will be here and will take questions. We are also in the municipality planning the possible eventuality of arrival of Hurricane Dorian, so we will stay here as long as we reasonably can to take questions, but the fire chief and some senior staff may be called elsewhere. So I'd like at this time to ask Chief Stuebing to please come forward.
Thank you, Chief Melvin. Thank you for joining us here today. At 12:43 a.m. on Tuesday, February 19th, our firefighters responded to a call they will never forget. More than 50 firefighters and support members from several fire stations and divisions responded or somehow were involved with the fire scene at 33 Quartz Drive. Dozens of our team members did everything in their power to fight the fire or figure out what caused it. Fire investigations, by their nature, are challenging to solve because often that evidence is destroyed by fire. In this case, we investigated every piece of evidence available and tested every possible theory to learn what we could about this fire. Despite our best efforts, we are unable to say what caused this tragic event. We can say that the fire originated in the back of the house in the main floor living room near a couch. However, at this time, the cause will be classified as undetermined. If new information becomes available, we will reopen the investigation. Besides having two of our own investigators, we consulted on this file with the Fire Marshal's Office and the investigator of the property owner's insurance company and various experts. All of us came up with the same conclusions. While a cause can't be identified at this time, investigators determined nothing that found at the scene would lead them to believe the fire was suspicious or that an accelerant was used. We also didn't find anything at the scene that would suggest that the cause was careless disposal of smoking materials. While we can't find what caused the fire, we can say what didn't cause it. Based on evidence collected and various tests, we can confidently say that the fire was not caused by kitchen cooking or other activities in the kitchen. And we are also confident there was no electrical fault or defect. Investigators determined that the circuit breakers to the electric baseboard heaters were in the off position before the fire, meaning there was no power directed to the heating sources in the house. Despite not knowing the cause, nothing led our investigators to believe that there is a public safety concern. One of the things that makes our municipality so great is our diversity. If you look in our schools, at our libraries, or in community centers, you will see people from all over the world who have now chosen to make Halifax their home. We see diversity as an opportunity for us to share valuable fire safety education that will help our new citizens help keep their homes safe. Whether it's correctly installing a smoke alarm or carbon monoxide alarm, practicing safe alternative escape routes out of your home, or even who to call at the first sign of an emergency, these are fire safety messages we have an obligation to deliver. With that in mind, we are continuing to work with ISANS, the Immigration Services Association of Nova Scotia, to provide education materials and training sessions for those interested in learning how to make their new Canadian homes safer. But teaching citizens to be safer in their own homes is nothing new. In fact, in December 2018, before the Quartz fire, Regional Council approved an addition of 2 responsibilities to our administrative order that governs our fire service. These 2 responsibilities are public education and fire prevention, which are the first 2 lines of defense for the fire service. People often picture firefighters fighting fires and making a rescue, and that certainly is an important part of our job. But here in Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency, our firefighters don't just respond to an emergency as the last line of defense. They assist with our community risk reduction team with public education and fire prevention activities as well. And certainly this and other tragic events commit us to do even more. There has been some public discussion about residential sprinklers in new homes. Sprinklers are a valuable addition to a fire safety strategy, and along with other tools such as smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, fire extinguishers, and home escape plans, it's important for homeowners to take all reasonable steps to ensure their home is as safe as possible. The discussion surrounding the issue of mandatory residential sprinklers is happening amongst many stakeholders across this nation. Ultimately, decisions rest with those agencies that have authority. To be clear, Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency does not have jurisdiction over building code regulations. This topic is part of a much broader policy discussion with many stakeholders that we encourage. Finally, I want to point out the incredible efforts of dozen firefighters who respond to that call in the early morning hours on January the 19th. It was through their excellent training, skills, and experience that they were able to prevent this fire from spreading to nearby homes. This call was certainly a tragedy, and our hearts and thoughts remain with the Barho family and our community. But I know our crews did everything they could on that cold night. I want to personally thank them for their ongoing professionalism, community first actions, which they exhibit day in and day out. I also want to recognize the efforts of our fire investigators who spent hundreds of hours trying to piece together what happened that night. I can tell you they are beyond disappointed that they were not able to determine how this fire happened. Unfortunately, that is sometimes the reality of fires of this magnitude. Thank you for coming here today. Deputy Chief Meldrum will now open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Stuebing. So we'll take questions. Please be patient with us as we try to get to everyone.
What was so difficult?
Oh, sorry, here, please. Sorry.
Were you able to speak with the father, Mr. Barho, in terms of investigation?
No, Mr. Barho has been unavailable to us. This certainly is one of the reasons that we've taken time to try to gather all evidence that we could.
What in particular about this investigation was difficult in that it ended up in the result that you got?
So I can tell you that since January 2015, major fires in our municipality, those are fires of significant damage, approximately 25% of those fires end up being classified as undetermined. The volume of fire and the extent of damage to evidence is a serious obstacle to fire investigators. Indeed, in a fire of this magnitude, it's common for materials to be totally destroyed by fire or indeed removed or washed away by necessary firefighting activities. So this is also true here. Our fire investigators simply lack the physical evidence to make a conclusive determination of cause.
Is there anything that you found that may have pointed you in one direction or another, but you ruled it out? Could you talk about that?
Absolutely, and I'll invite Division Chief Kobe to talk about that as well. But you can see the board to my left, where investigators with evidence were able to rule out several things, such as the electrical heating. We know that this fire, we ruled out cooking in the kitchen, for example. So maybe Chief Kobe would look at that.
Thank you for the question. Yes, any investigation such as this is very complex. In this particular instance,
It was 2 of our lead investigators with Halifax Fire, in addition to a representative from the Office of the Fire Marshal with the province, and the insurance is his investigators. All collectively looked at several avenues and speculated on any different number of causes. I also want to point out that at any point in this investigation, had we come to a conclusion that there was a public safety risk, an imminent public safety risk, we would have communicated that immediately, and that was not the case here. We haven't found any design of the home or any objects in the home that we would consider to be a public safety risk. When it comes to the investigation, we followed several leads. We took the stove apart to make sure that that wasn't a cause. The baseboard heater was something we looked at. That was taken away and tested along with the thermostat that served the baseboard heater and all the associated wiring. All those things were taken back to the lab and tested. The breaker that served the baseboard, if all the baseboards in the building, baseboard heaters in the building, the breakers were in the off position, not the trip position, the off position. Those breakers were all tested to make sure they were actually functioning properly, and they all were. So we chased several leads, which involved a lot of investigation of the materials in the building, but none of them came to a conclusive cause. Were any closer than the others, but you just, at the end, couldn't say that that was the cause? In other words, did you feel you were close at any point?
No, I mean, you speculate on a lot of different causes, but there was not one that was rising above the rest. They were all not easy to determine that they weren't the cause, but they fell off after we did the testing.
How was the family heating the home? The baseboard heaters were turned off.
We don't have any evidence of another source of heat in the building. It was the baseboard heaters, and they were in the off position at the time of the fire.
That's all of the baseboard heaters in the home were turned off?
That's correct.
And there's no evidence of another heating source of any kind?
That's correct.
How cold was it that night? Minus?
I'm not sure of the temperature. Cold.
Was there any evidence of a space heater used?
There was no space heater found in the house. Keeping in mind that this was a very hot fire, and so most of the objects on the main floor, for example, they're completely burned away.
Was there anything based on, speaking to members of the Barho family, Kawthar, I guess in this case, was there any indication that any other kind of heater would be used? Sometimes other things using fuel sources are common. Even if there wasn't physical evidence of that, was there any suggestion that that's how they were heating the home, which is commonly done in some parts of the world?
As a matter of our policy and past practice, we won't comment on particular witness statements. So I won't go into detail except for to say that the baseboard heaters, the sole source of heat that we found in the house, they were not functioning at the time of the fire.
So maybe you mentioned it, and Frank, I want to make sure I understand. When and why did you decide that it was not a criminal fire?
We work closely with Halifax Regional Police when it comes to arson. Our investigators know what to look for, say, an accelerant or an intentionally lit fire. In this case, because of the charring and burning patterns of the area of origin, we know that it started inside, and there were no traces of accelerants, and the fire, the burning patterns didn't indicate any kind of accelerant was used.
There have been reports of an explosion, that neighbors heard an explosion at some point. Can you shed any light on that? Could that have been a propane tank for a barbecue or something like that, or was that just unfounded?
Certainly. I'll comment on the barbecue element. So we looked at the barbecue, certainly. It was outside. We know the fire started inside. But we also know the propane tank wasn't connected at the time of the fire. So we know that the barbecue was not the source of this fire. It was not the cause. In terms of the explosion, I think I'll refer to Chief Andrews to speak about the dynamics of the fire.
Thank you very much for that question. I think specifically to the propane tank, it is common that propane tanks have pressure release valves. So as that fire and the heat began to extend near that propane tank, it is our belief that the pressure relief valve released, causing propane to be released, causing a momentary intensification of the fire, to answer your question.
So neighbors could have heard an explosion and there may have
There
been
was not an explosion at the propane tank, but
Okay.
there could have been an intensification of the fire based on the pressure relief valve releasing on that propane tank.
because it was nearby.
That's correct. It was on the deck.
And if I may add, it's very common in structural fires for fire behavior to be quite violent and forceful. So if you have a fire in a home, any home, in a room, as fresh air is introduced to that compartment space and the windows heat and the windows fail, that sudden onrush of oxygen-rich air into the space can make a very powerful expansion of fire, which can be visible for some distance away from the building and can often be accompanied by sounds of broken windows. We're aware in the community that there was some talk of that sort of behavior, which would not be untypical in a house fire.
How quickly did this fire spread, and what did that indicate, if anything, to you?
Well, we don't know how quickly the fire spread. What we do know is when our firefighters arrived, they encountered a building with heavy fire involvement on 2 levels. The fire was well advanced when they got there, and they had a significant challenge in dealing with the volume of fire.
Based on your response time and what you found when you got there, did the parents have had any time at all to get the children out?
I certainly can't say what may or may not have happened before our firefighters arrived. We know that our response time for our first unit was 6 minutes and 5 seconds. Again, on arrival, they found a lot of fire at the property on 2 levels.
You mentioned that Mr. Barho was unavailable to you. Can you comment at all on his condition? Is he still in hospital? Is he still in a coma?
I cannot. For reasons of respect for the family and protection of privacy, we won't be discussing Mr. Barho's condition.
But he has been unavailable to you
That is
the
correct.
entire investigation.
That is correct. It's certainly true that we have been hopeful to interview Mr. Barho, and we've been unable to do that.
Does this investigation stay open until you have the chance to, or what's the status?
So this investigation will be reported as closed with a finding of undetermined. If we get new information that allows us to do more work, we'll reopen the file.
Some friends of the family initially said that they thought that it was a couch that had been pushed too close to a baseboard heater that caught fire. Just to be clear, so was that a possibility based on your investigation?
No, that's been ruled out. So as the chief and Chief Colby both indicated, we know that the electrical power to that baseboard heater was shut off before the fire. Certainly the area of origin is immediately adjacent to that piece of furniture, but the baseboard heater has been ruled out as a source of ignition.
Did your investigation tell you who had turned off the circuit breaker?
We don't know that.
Is it possible the breakers had tripped, or were they in an off position prior to the fire?
We know that they were in the off position prior to the fire. Electrical engineers were contracted to assess those components, and they delivered a finding that they were definitely off before the fire. Anything to add to that?
In the middle of February, with all the baseboard heaters of the house off, what was the family using for heat?
I certainly can't speak to that.
Did
No,
you
we
glean
can
anything
speak
from your
to-
interviews? Sorry. Did you glean anything from your interviews that you can comment on the source of heat? It seems unlikely that a family would be living in a home in the middle of February with absolute heat.
Right. So the interview content that is useful to us is anything that indicates the area of origin and the ignition source. And there was no information in interview that gave us an ignition source indication. Other than that, we really can't speculate on what the occupants of the home may or may not have been doing.
Why undetermined and not accidental? Because if you've ruled out arson and careless disposal of smoking materials, then wouldn't it be accidental even if it's undetermined? What's the difference?
Chief Covey may correct me on this, but we have to understand both the area of origin and the ignition source before we can get to a finding of accidental.
That's correct. I'd also point out that when it comes to careless use and disposal of smoking materials or an intentionally lit fire, we haven't ruled that out. We have no evidence to support those as causes. So we can't say accidental. Accidental would mean we knew exactly what caused it. And so those two items are still unknown to us. Ruled out would be kitchen cooking, the electrical system, including the baseboard heater and the thermostat, the breakers and the barbecue. Those are absolutely ruled out, but there are some items that still are not.
Could you just reiterate who all was investigated with the parties again, and just how extensive it was, the time that was involved?
Certainly. Hundreds of hours were put into this. Two lead investigators working for Halifax Fire were dedicated to this file, in addition to a representative from the Office of the Fire Marshal, it's the province, and the insurance companies hire a third-party investigator who we worked in concert with during the course of the investigation.
Was this an unusually long investigation? There's some notions out there that perhaps this was taken way too long.
I'd say that part of the investigation where we're looking for cause was concluded earlier. The delay really was waiting in hopes that we could interview our last key witness, Mr. Barho, and we're at the point now where we're going to release the finding as undetermined pending a change in that.
I know you can't comment on what the witnesses told you in terms of evidence and that, but can you give us an idea of how extensive it was in terms of how many witnesses you were able to talk to gain some knowledge?
I don't have a number, but many witnesses were involved, whether it be the fire crews, other individual staff, neighbors, witnesses that were just there on scene, family members, representatives with ISANs, and all those individuals would have been interviewed. Yeah.
Have you conveyed these results to Kawthar Barho, and can you say anything about how she took the news?
Certainly.
Yes, thank you for the question. So this morning, the fire chief and I and Chief Covey and some of the fire investigation team did go to the hospital to speak to Mrs. Barho and let her know about these findings. And again, to pass on to her our sincere condolences for the outcome of this fire.
There's a lot of different speculation out there online. How harmful can that type of speculation be for, like, the family and the fire investigators who look at that stuff?
During the course of this investigation, we've been aware of many online theories and areas of speculation. And to your question, that's very harmful. Speculation can create false assumptions about what may or may not have happened that can be so terribly damaging to the people involved in the fire, so terribly damaging to members of the community. It can cause fear and unrest in the community who may have fears of fire risk in their home when there's no basis in fact for that. And it's also damaging to our firefighters as well. So we absolutely appreciate the question and the need for everyone to appreciate that we work only from the basis of hard evidence.
Can you comment on mental health supports that have been available for your firefighters in the months since this occurred?
Absolutely, I can. Stress injury is not new for firefighters, and first responders generally face very traumatic situations regularly throughout their careers. But there's no doubt this fire was special. This fire in scope was almost unique. Not unique in our community, but certainly almost unique. The loss of life, the age of the children, the entire tragedy has deeply affected our fire investigators and our firefighters. We met with our firefighters this morning to talk to them about what we're talking to you now. Immediately following the event, we made critical incident stress management teams available to our firefighters to help them remember, as they have been trained, what the warning signs of stress injury are and how to reach out for help. We also provided psychological services for any who wanted it, and we continue to do so. Every firefighter is in a different place. Some firefighters were away from our workplace for a while. We're very pleased that everyone's back to work, but still people are suffering. Some folks are receiving treatment. Others report to us that they're okay, and we do like to indicate, it's okay to feel okay, but there's no guarantee that there won't be harmful effects or symptoms later during their careers. So yes, this fire has had a lasting impact on our folks.
In your experience, have you found that homes built in the last 20 years might burn quicker or faster than homes built, say, 50, 60 years ago?
Absolutely. So homes built 50 or 60 years ago, we refer to them as legacy construction, and they used mass, they used large structural members to hold up the weight of the home. Modern construction is lightweight in design and uses engineering methods. And lightweight construction has a lot of great advantages to homeowners. It uses less material and therefore can be less costly. Lightweight construction can be insulated very well to reduce heating and cooling costs. Lightweight construction also allows home designers to use architectural methods that weren't possible before. And lightweight construction is designed for occupant escape in mind. So interior partitions are made of fire-resistant materials like gyprock or drywall, and alarm systems are required. So smoke alarms are required in new home construction to alert occupants to get out and stay out at the sound of an alarm. Having said that, as firefighters, we know that the lighter weight of the structural members that hold the building up, once they're subjected to fire, they can fail more quickly. We're aware of that. We know that if the drywall is breached or the fires are in attics and homes in our communities, lightweight construction gives us less time to do that work. Absolutely. And as Chief Stuebing reminds me, and quite right, it's not just construction that matters. The things that are in our homes today are built very differently and made of synthetic materials more and more than they ever were 20 years ago. So the furniture in my house is largely based on polycarbons and plastics. Those materials burn very, very hot, can lead to flashover conditions very, very quickly, and produce volumes of toxic smoke that are very dangerous to occupants, that are much more of a risk than they were perhaps in the 1950s and 60s. Anything to add to that?
Sorry, I apologize if you mentioned this earlier, but smoke detectors. Were there smoke detectors? Sorry, I just realized it's not on the list.
Certainly. So smoke alarms are so important. Smoke alarms are absolutely, if there's one thing that we can do today, we can make sure that everyone has working smoke alarms in all levels of their home, and that we all have an exit plan for when those smoke alarms sound. To your question, yes, smoke alarms were in the building. Investigators found the basement level smoke alarm, tested it, and found it to be in working condition. A smoke alarm was found on the main floor where the fire originated. That smoke alarm was no longer on the ceiling, it was found on the floor. That's not uncommon in fires, for fire damage to do that, and sometimes for necessary firefighting activities to actually move that smoke alarm from where it landed. Upstairs, the smoke alarms were not found due to the extent of the fire damage, but we do understand that they were part of the building construction.
Do you know if they were wired in or battery powered or both?
In this particular home, the year of construction, they would have, and just based on our investigation, they were all wired in. So the basement, the main floor, and the upper floor are all interconnected, we would say. The upper floor would have had smoke alarms in the hallway leading to the bedrooms, in addition to inside the bedrooms, all being interconnected. In addition, for cases like a power outage, they have battery backups in them as well.
So there's nothing to indicate that the smoke detectors on the main floor and the third floor were inoperable, but you can't conclusively say that they were operable.
That's right. There was, of course, on the upper floor, there's nothing to test. The smoke alarm that was found on the main floor was beyond testing. It was fire damage and water damage as well.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and then once that's done, if you wish, some members of staff will remain for one-on-ones.
Is there sort of a key fire safety takeaway from this fire for people? I think the community is generally pretty scared about this. Is there one key thing that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Would you like to take this one?
Certainly.
For any fire, not specific to this fire, we have no cause in this case. So we have nothing to point to educate on. Our number one recommendation is smoke alarms. But I would go through our standard messaging, which is prevention, detection, and escape. Prevention, any activity involving electricity, whether it's charging your phone or plugging in a power bar, any activity using heat like cooking or fire, open fire. There's a safe way to do all of those things. And even on our website, you can educate yourself on a safe way to cook, a safe way to charge your phone, those kinds of things. So we stress everyone to educate themselves on the right way to do those activities. Detection is smoke alarms and CO alarms. I would recommend that you have one on every floor of your house. I'd recommend that you have them interconnected in your bedrooms and outside your sleeping rooms. And I further recommend that you sleep with your doors closed. That prevents the smoke from getting into the bedroom And if you've got interconnected smoke alarms, then you'll be warned of the smoke and have lots of time to deploy the third avenue, which is escape. So you should have an escape plan. You should know 2 ways out of every room. You should know where you're meeting when you go outside. Everyone in the house should know what the escape plan is, and you should practice it frequently. But also mention civic numbering. If we can't see your civic number, we can't find you. This is very important that you have your civic number displayed and it's visible so that crews can reach you when those seconds absolutely matter.
So as we're coming close to a close, I'd like to add, without any reference to the tragic fire on Quartz Drive, we see this also as an opportunity to remind everyone to take every precaution to protect their family and their homes from the tragedy of fire. So as Chief Covey has said, there's numerous steps. Now for residents of HRM, I just want to remind everyone of 2 important programs that they can access. Our fire service offers an alarmed and ready program for residents who don't have a smoke alarm and perhaps cannot afford one, or perhaps do not have a battery and can't afford one, or maybe don't have the physical ability to install those devices. Also, we have a push program, Practice Using Safety in the Home, where our fire companies are out in the street, our frontline firefighters visiting homes throughout the communities to review these safety tips with residents, to help them test their smoke alarms, and to make sure that all their questions are answered. So we encourage any resident with questions or who would like access to those important services to dial 311 here in Halifax to get a ticket in, as we call it, so that the firefighters can come and help you practice fire safety. I want to thank everyone for coming and your interest in this file. Once again, our condolences to the Barho family and the community in Spryfield who were affected by this terrible, terrible tragedy. Thank you very much.
Were you going to address Dorian as well? Maybe your statement about potential Dorian this weekend, the hurricane?
Sure.
Chief Andrews would speak to that, sure.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Once again, just to reiterate where we started here. So we're currently tracking Hurricane Dorian, which is making its way, tracking northeast up the eastern seaboard, sea coast. As well, there is Hurricane Gabriel, which has also started and is beginning to progress and migrate northwest, which has the possibility to converge on the Halifax area in the wee hours of Saturday and early Sunday morning. At this point, we have begun our initial planning to prepare and communicate to the public what they can do to help prepare for this emergency and this potential storm. In the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have much more understanding on the intensity and the impacts, be they wind or rain or both, and what that convergence of those storms might mean to the municipality. So, early days, but we'll know more in the coming 48 hours.
Okay, so thank you very much. I hope everyone has a pleasant remainder of the day. And I say senior staff will be here if you're seeking one-on-ones. Please approach us individually. Thank you. Let's first make sure all this is off.